Hey Dave, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you, mate?
Good, mate. How you going?
I'm very well. Look, lots and lots to talk about with you today. The main reason of which is the new album called Got You Covered, 15 tracks and some really great interpretations in there by the Jets of some of Australia's most iconic outfits, everyone from the Easy Beats to the Radiators, Dragon, Men at Work, AC/DC, Paul Kelly and more. It's quite a wide and varied selection. How hard was it to settle on the 15 final songs?
Well, we had a bit of an idea at first of a bunch of ones that we wanted to do, and then we got Triple M involved to just get feedback from the listeners out there to see what they wanted to have on the record. So between those two kind of the two mediums, we kind of come up with a short list of about 25. Some of them sadly didn't make it. We didn't end up putting a Chisel one on there because the one that we wanted to do was Star Hotel. Mm-hmm. And we went through it a couple of times. And I said, I can't sing that. It's just, Barnesy at his absolute ball tear and best. So, some kind of fell by the wayside that way. But, look, in the end, we really wanted it to be something that we all enjoyed doing with our own little twist on things. So, it was a great fun process, actually.
Now, I read a quote in the press statement where you called it a great Aussie party album. But further to that, I reckon by paying homage to these bands, I reckon it's going to inspire younger fans to research and hunt down the original versions, and that's a pretty cool thing.
Well, that's kind of always been the thing with doing covers for us. It's kind of keeping those songs alive or putting them back into the public forum. Doing Wedding Ring by the Easy Beats, I just love that song, and I know the Sports have done it before us. To be able to pay homage and to give people a bit of an indication of where our love of music sits and the songs that we love and the songwriters that we respect. And look, I just think Australia is we've just got some of the greatest songwriters and bands like Men at Work and guys like Paul Kelly and obviously AC/DC and talking about Wedding Ring before. So we've got Wedding Ring by Vander and Young, and we've also got on there Guitar Band, which was a Stevie Wright song off his album Hard Road, written by Vander and Young. And of course we've got Rock and Roll Damnation on there by AC/DC, which I think maybe they were still involved with the production at that time with Vander and Young. So, those guys were really, along with, bands like AC/DC and the Angels, they kind of wrote the blueprint for that blues-based Australian rock that became, what we all know and love as pub rock. So we couldn't be more thankful and more appreciative and grateful to Harry and George for inadvertently setting us on the path that we can still continue to follow today.
Well, mate, you just mentioned Cold Chisel, which didn't make the cut, and I got to ask, maybe I would have thought something by Rose Tattoo or maybe Billy Thorpe would have been covered. I can recall seeing the Jets doing We Can't Be Beaten a couple of times even before a State of Origin match.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, it leaves the door open for other exploits and other journeys into doing that stuff. And I mean, we kind of did this album as a bit of a stopgap because next year's our 30th anniversary, and I said, what about we just put all the songs that we've covered over the years together, master them and mix them up and put them on an album. And Paul, our bass player, said, that sounds like the most half-assed idea you've ever had. And I've had some over the years. And he was the one that kind of said, let's do this. And when he said that, we were like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Are we just going to get a small studio and do it, or how are we going to go about this? And we mentioned it to Sid James, our producer of many albums, and he just really wanted to get involved. And in the end, we kind of came out with something that we're all just absolutely stoked with it. The production values as well as the recordings has made it something really special, and it's a great party album. It's I said to our manager, I want to do Christmas parties and just play this stuff, because there's something really fun about doing other people's songs, and about, as I said, hitting the marks that these other guys did. I mean, Overkill by Men at Work, I was just so stoked to get to do that song, because I was a huge fan. I think one of the first CDs I ever had was Cargo by Men at Work, and to be able to do that, not in a kind of a half-assed manner, but to do it with the band all firing and replacing some saxophone or woodwind bits with guitar bits and stuff like that was kind of really, really great fun. And to come out with the final product, we were stoked.
Well, the band have always had the knack of remoulding another artist's song and making it their own. And believe it or not, I've met folks over the years who are unaware that songs like Eve of Destruction and Shivers are actually not Screaming Jets originals. And I think that, in my opinion, that has a lot to do with how well they're covered and how a band interprets a song and what they bring to it. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Shivers. I mean, I still get people come up and say, "Oh, mate, did you write that?" And obviously, always very quick to say, "No, that was by the late great Roland S. Howard." But yeah, it kind of, and that kind of came about really organically, because I was a huge fan of Michael Hutchence in Excess, and the movie Dogs in Space, which was pretty well panned by critics far and wide. But that's where I saw that song, or heard that song for the first time, and the fact that it was a 2-chord wonder made it very easy for me to learn it and then bring it to the band. And as you say, I mean, look at the guys in the band at the moment, and the guys who were in the band back in the day when we recorded that, great musicians, and we always try to bring something of our own to it. Folsom Prison Blues is another one that we did. Shaken by the Sunny Boys, and it really is a great way to tip our hat to those that have inspired us and shaped our music over the years as young guys.
Dave, you mentioned the Easy Beats and Wedding Ring before. Are they a band who you've grown to appreciate over the years, or were you aware of them early on in your life? I mean, were you checking out Stevie Wright live back in the mid-'80s?
Well, I was lucky enough. We actually played a support set with Stevie in about 1987 in my first band, and he was mercurial then, and he'd been obviously through the ringer by that stage with his problems leaving Easy Beats. But what happened? I think that the first time I realised exactly how big they were and what an impact they made on the scene was. We were on tour in America, and driving along through some town with the radio on, and Friday on My Mind came on, and I was like, wow, these guys actually really did make it. They weren't. They actually made inroads all over the world. They were our first real bona fide rock stars. And then only a few months ago, I saw that the biopic that they did on them on the ABC, and I thought it was fantastic. And it just showed how passionate Ted Albert was about not getting involved with the machinations of the band, just saying, I love this band, here's my support. And it was like, and then of course you find out about the Alberts legacy, which once again goes to the heart of where Australian rock came from, Rose Tattoo, AC/DC, John Paul Young, that all came out of Ted Albert's involvement with Harry and George, and and to have walked the halls, and we were actually doing a bit of demoing in the late '80s at Albert's, not in the original Albert's studio, but in my first band. We went there and did a few demos. So to have that kind of tenuous link even is a great thing for us.
It's good stuff. So. Let me talk about Got You Covered. So, as you mentioned, it's produced again by longtime collaborator Steve James. I think that's a partnership which goes back over 25 years. What is it about Steve that keeps you going back to him?
He's just a great. He has a great musical brain. He knows how to work with us. I spend most of my time when I'm in the studio, not trying to get great performances, but to make Steve laugh, because he is a genuinely funny, beautiful bloke, and we just have a great time. And we've worked with other producers over the years. Robbie Adams we worked with, who'd done a bit of stuff with U2, and he kind of came as a bit of an outsider by that stage, because we'd already done 2 albums with Steve. And then, so yeah, there was a little bit of I think Steve wasn't all that. He had his nose put out of joint after we did 2 successful albums with him and then moved on. Just, you know, when you're young, you're thinking, oh, we might be able to find someone else. But as it turned out, we already had Steve, and he came back. We started working again with him in about 2004 for an EP, and then for the album Chrome that came out in 2016, he was a major contributor and major factor as to why that album was sounded great. He's great with songs. You know, he knows when to leave them alone, or he knows when they need to be to have some injection of creativity. So look, he's an integral part of the band when it comes to producing and recording albums.
And kind of interesting that, by my reckoning, one of the first Aussie bands he worked with was the Saints on their Eternally Yours album back in 78.
Yeah.
And since that time, obviously he's worked with a whole bunch of artists, Mental as Anything. I think he did Redback Fever by the Angels. Did Cold Chisel, Last Wave of Summer, Super Jesus. I think he did Pistols as well, didn't he? Didn't he do? I think he did something from the Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Something else.
I think he worked with Sid Vicious on was it My Way?
Yeah.
I think he worked more with Sid when he did a bit of a solo thing just before his departure. Yeah, but you know, he even worked with Golden Earring back in the day, and I'm pretty sure he worked out of Townhouse Studios, which was Richard Branson's studio back in the day. So he just has an amazing pedigree. And of course, the first time I ever went into the studio with Steve, or the Jets went into the studio with Steve, I came out at about 2-3 o'clock in the morning. There was a Carry On movie on the telly, and I looked at Sid James and I went, hang on a minute. And I walked back into the control room. I said to Steve, are you Sid James's son? And he said, yes. And I was like, no way. So, I mean, there's that as well. He's definitely connected to the English music and entertainment scene for many, many decades.
Dave, let's talk AC/DC, and the tune Rock and Roll Damnation gets the nod on this album. I know the Jets did a rip and take of Ain't No Fun Waiting Around to Be a Millionaire way back when. I guess selecting just one AC/DC tune is extremely tough, and I've actually always thought that Livewire would be a great tune for you guys to cover.
Yeah, we've done that back in the day. We used to have that in our set. But Rock and Roll Damnation, we kind of, I think Power Age is probably it's the most brutal AC/DC album, I think, from when I was growing up. And, Bond's lyrics were just, you know, you could pick 20 or 30 songs of his that just have those great bloke, Aussie larrikin kind of lyrics. I think that was just a general consensus. We were looking at songs we wanted of theirs that we might do, and we decided on that one, and had to get in there and stretch the old throat for it. Don't worry about that. I mean, Bond's I could bang on about Bond all day. He's just an absolute one out of the box, and there's very few that have ever been able to emulate his great lyrics. I hold Bon and Phil Lynott as the two greatest rock poets of all time, in the way that they could tell a story and make themselves sound tough and cool without any posturing or posering. It was just the way the words fell out that it still sounds fresh to this day to me. So yeah, we just was almost like pull one out of a hat and just go with that. So Rock and Roll Damnation got the nod.
You just mentioned Livewire some time back. Makes me think, what kind of covers were you doing in early outfits like Sudden Impact and Aspect?
Yeah, we're doing definitely doing Jailbreak. We did a lot of Aussie stuff. I remember Forever Now, we used to play that Chisel song, and what else we did? Hey Hey My My, or My Hey Hey, or however you call it, from by Neil Young. And I was actually remembering the other day we loved the Johnny Winter version of Boney Maroney, so that was one of the first songs that we ever kind of put in our set. Rain, which funnily enough has made it onto this album. We loved Dragon as a young band, so yeah. And of course the Angels. I remember the first time we ever got to support the Angels would have been about 86 or 87 in my first band. And we were through the roof. We couldn't believe it. And then after all the excitement died down, we realised we'd have to learn some new songs, because the lion's share of songs that we did in our set were Angels songs. Small Price to Pay, Shadow Boxer, Coming Down on Me. So yeah, we took our cues a lot from. I think there was rehearsal sessions where all we did was watch The Last Stand and Angels Narara 83, I think it was their big year. But yeah, we just took such a big influence from those bands, and we played a couple of Chisel songs as well that escaped me. But yeah, we tried to at first kind of concentrate on a lot of Australian content.
From what I've read, mate, Aspect did so much gigging in the mid to late 80s. In retrospect, do you think those early days hardened you for the road ahead with the Jets, particularly in the early 90s?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's nothing gets you ready for it like doing it live, and whether that was doing our own gigs, or doing 3 or 4 sets a night, or supporting big bands, which was they were the cream gigs. And for those, you'd get to we had to supply loaders, so we'd rock up at 2:00 in the arvo and help them load out of the truck and help them set the gear up, and then we'd go on, and then we'd stay around and watch the main band and try and pick up some dregs, and then help load out at the end of the show and things like that. They really got you involved in not only the performance side of it, but moving big black boxes and gaff tape and multi-cores and stuff like that. And then we went on to own our own PA in that band in Aspect, and we if we weren't playing, we'd hire it out, and Grant would do sound and I'd do lights, and it really was kind of starting from the ground up and learning all the bits and pieces. So when we did get to the stage where the Jets started and we were hiring crew, we weren't so much doing it ourselves anymore, but we knew what the boys were going through.
For me, the real surprises on Got You Covered are the Flowers and Radio Birdman songs. Were you into Birdman and all that scene when you were growing up?
Yeah, well, I surfed at South Newcastle Beach when I was a young fella, and the older crew there, they were all into Birdman and Sunny Boys and the Stooges and MC5 and stuff like that. So in an effort to be cool, I went. The first tattoo I ever got was a Radio Birdman, their insignia. And I still remember I was so proud of myself. I went up the beach and went for a surf the first day I got it. Just lumped on a bunch of Vaseline and got out there. And I think the older blokes all thought I was a bit of a dick. But yeah, and to now I've met Rob and the boys backstage a few times and showed them me tat and that, and we used to love all that kind of. That was another side of that our first manager brought to us. He used to book a place called the Uptown Circus and Norths in Newcastle, which were all about alternative music. So it was through him that I learned about things like the Lime Spiders and Hunters and Collectors and, Sunny Boys and Radio Birdman. So I've been very lucky to have had, influences from a lot of different sides. My 2 older brothers were influential in that one of them was an AC/DC and Angels fan, the other one was a Sex Pistols and Stiff Little Fingers and that type of thing. And my parents, Willie Nelson and James Taylor and all that stuff. So yeah, I've had a very well-rounded education when it comes to the music that I love.
Mate, I just want to talk about the Angels cover on here too, which is Shadowboxer, which is a different arrangement, which sounds pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, no, I think Paulie, our bass player, and Mark, our new drummer, they kind of were mucking around with it, and we didn't really kind of muck around with too many of the arrangements. Kind of tried to keep them, pretty faithful. But what happened with that was when we just that half time thing in the verse, it like gave it a real kind of different power, and it was. I think that one and Gimme Head by the Rads, we almost the guitarists almost Metallica-ized the riff in that one. So they're kind of the ones that we had a little bit of fun messing around with, and I got the thumbs up from John and Rick, and that's another great thing with most of the songs that we've sent them out to the people who have the original writers of them, and we've got really great responses from them. Todd Hunter loves Rain, and I think Paul Kelly's manager said that Paul listened to it and said, "Good one," and he said, "That's as good as it gets for Paul." So yeah, obviously these guys have heard of us, but I hate to say that we're contemporaries just because I still hold them, most of them or all these bands in kind of very high regard from my youth, but to get feedback from the writers and the original performers of the songs is a great thing as well.
You just mentioned John and Rick. I'd like to know what would be the most important things which you've picked up from the Brewster Brothers.
You just have to really stick at it. I mean, they've been through ups and downs. There's a time where John was sacked from the Angels, I think, or they certainly parted ways acrimoniously. And they kind of John and Rick kind of patched things up in the early '90s, and then the Doc left the band a couple of times, and they found themselves unable to perform as the Angels. Mate, those guys were doing anything they could to stay in the game, and whether that meant sitting in a restaurant bar at the Sydney Casino on a Wednesday night or whatever, and it's a real testament to the fact that they decided as 18, 19-year-old blokes that all they were going to do was music, and they've been able to, through thick and thin, and through fallouts and breakups and makeups, they've been able to stick it out. And now, I mean, we're kind of on this tour at the moment, the face-to-face tour, and we're just selling out all over the country. So it's very gratifying to be a part of it, but also to know that the driving force behind it is these guys who've been doing it. They're in their 60s now, so they've just been keeping on, and that's the only advice. Whenever people say, what advice do you give to young bands? It's just keep going, just keep going. The more you play, the better you get. The more people want to see you. So they're inspirational, those two boys.
That Talk the Talk record, Dave, by the way, has some really strong material on there. The self-titled track, From Memory, and I Come in Peace in particular, I think they're as strong as anything in the band's catalogue and sit quite comfortably alongside the well-known classics. Is there a new album in the works for the Angels?
Yeah, there is. We've been working on it. We kind of got most of the work done before, like towards the end of last year. And then, of course, we went in and re-recorded the Face to Face album, and obviously that's been the focus. But yeah, we've got an album just about fully in the can. And another thing about working with John and Rick is that they're more than happy to have myself or Nick Norton, the drummer, or Sam Brewster, or any of the Brewster sons, even the guys who aren't in the band. John and Rick are more than happy to get input from anywhere, and to have written a couple of songs with the guys now and had them included on albums is it's a real feather in the cap for me. And they're just so supportive of us, and and the Australian music industry as a whole, they'll do anything, those boys, for to fly the flag. So yeah, we've got the new album. I guess it may come out next year. So and then of course I think we'll be doing Face to Face this year, and I'm pretty sure they released No Exit in 1979. So I imagine that's what we'll be doing next year. So it's just great to have. As a plumber mate of mine said, I was working for him and I cut some pipe too long one day. I said, "Oh, it's too long." He said, "That." He said, "That's all right." He said, "It's better to be looking at it than looking for it." And that's what I think of. That's what I think of work. When I'd look at all the work coming up, I go, "Well, better to be looking at it than looking for it." That's for sure.
Well, mate, I'm going to head to the time tunnel and hit you with some questions from the past, if you don't mind. Now,
yep.
I saw Guns N' Roses at Wembley in late August of 1991, and when I entered the stadium, there were Screaming Jets posters taped up outside the venue. That tells me that you had really good promo into your first UK gigs in September of 1991. What are your memories of that tour, which, of course, included a gig at the legendary Marquee Club?
Oh, it was unreal. I mean, we were kind of living the dream at that stage. We had great record company support. We were, doing our first tour in a tour bus like they do over in Europe and the US. And mate, we were just having a blast. We played, as you say, the Marquee. We toured many countries through Europe. We did Germany, France, UK, Scotland, Ireland. It was an absolute buzz, and of course that kicked us over to the United States, where we did about 40-state tour over there as well. So it was, mate, that was right when we were right on the cusp. Big things were in store, but as they say, there's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip. But it was certainly something that we have great memories about.
You just mentioned America. It makes me want to ask you if conquering America was a priority for the band early on, or were you content to focus on the European circuit?
I think, any band who leaves the shores wants to go and conquer kind of everywhere, really. We found out the thing about doing that stuff is you really need to take the time. I mean, In Excess are a classic example of a band who went over there and toured for years and kind of rarely came home. I think that, the coming home and, running out of money and then changing management, they were the kind of things that conspired against us. I think we had a real shot at doing it over there, but it's, another thing advice I give to young bands is if you're going to make it, you might as well make it over there first, as opposed to here first, because it's you spend a lot of time in Australia getting to a certain level, and then of course you go overseas, you're not at that level anymore. You got to go back down to the shit kicker really, but you still have to spend a lot of money. So. As I said, we were very lucky with our tour support from the record company in the first place. Then we had problems started at the record company and management level, and we kind of we just put our heads in the sand and said, let's get back on the road, let's get out there and tour, let's keep going. And I guess you can't just fluke it when it comes to that. Obviously, there's a bit of luck involved, but you need good management structures and good people at your record company to make sure that those goals are achieved while you're out there slogging it out on the road.
I've always wondered, Dave Holland from Judas Priest joined the band in European tour in '93. How did that all come about? And I guess I'm meaning, why was Dave Holland chosen to fill the drum stool?
Well, we were caught between a rock and a hard place. Brad, our drummer, went home with illness. He wasn't able to continue with the band anymore, and we had a European tour, which the pinnacle of that was the fact we were playing a performance at the Rockham Ring, which is a part of the Monsters of Rock tour, and that was happening in Germany. So we got in the studio and rehearsed a bunch of drummers, and he was the best of the lot. And then obviously, so once he filled in for that tour, And then once we were leaving England, I think he was pretty keen to get a Guernsey to come to America with us, but that would have entailed us having to employ him and, be part of his visa process. So we kind of didn't have the time and money to put into that kind of that effort. So we headed off to the United States, and that's when Craig Rosebeer headed over from Australia, and we spent like 3 or 4 weeks in the States, just in the studio every day. Richard Lara, our guitarist, then got sick, so we had to rehearse the drummer in without him and wait for him to get better before heading out on the road. So, yeah, I mean, one day there'll be a book about it, but you still look back on those things, and obviously you look at missed opportunities and maybe a bit of immaturity, and obviously we were having a big fucking party.
Yeah.
it was party Grand Central, and maybe we let a few things slip through the cracks.
You just mentioned Richard Lara, which, as you mentioned before, the 30th anniversary of the band is approaching. Are there any plans to get the original lineup, which broke through, together for a one-off reformation to honour the anniversary?
Look, we've talked about it. It's always on the table. I think I'm pretty sure Grant and Richard did some type of performance recently where they were going to doing the first 2 albums live in Newcastle. Yeah, look, I think there's still a little bit of you know how it is after all that water goes under the bridge, but I think I'd like to see maybe something in Newcastle where we can reunite the original lineup, even for just a one-off. I think it would be. I think it might be a bit of a healing thing to do, but at the moment that's kind of in the hands of management and Richard and Grant.
Mate, we should wind this interview up, but before you go, every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band. Can be one of yours or something which is significant to you. What would you like to choose and why?
Look, if you could play it, it's a song I absolutely love. Matt Finish, and I reckon Short Note, their album, the album, I don't know whether it was for Matt Finish, I think it was Short Note, it was called. I just think Short Note is one of the greatest songs ever written by anyone, for Australian or international. So that's a song that any time I get a chance and I want to have a bit of a trip back, but also have a listen to just great song craftsmanship. That's the one I listen to. So if you could get Short Note, that'd be killer for me.
Matt Finish, too easy. The album is called Got You Covered, 15 timeless tunes which are given the amped up treatment courtesy of the mighty Screaming Jets. It's available from July 27th. Dave, thank you for your time today. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you very much, mate.